As I recall, I do the I do the announcement, right?
Correct.
This is good evening. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Montclair Township Zoning Board of Adjustment. Notice of this meeting has been published in the Star Ledger and the Montclair Times, as well as posted inside the municipal building on the bulletin board, as well as on the bulletin boards outside both doors. We've also posted the agenda on the Montclair Township's webpage for the Board of Adjustment. Tonight's meeting will be conducted using WebEx events and can be followed on either either TV 34 or the Montclair Government YouTube channel. The first item on our agenda is our roll call. Mr. Allen, Mr. Church.
Here.
Mr. Fleischer.
Here.
Mr. McCullough. I don't know. I know you're here. Maybe you haven't, Ms. John, I don't know if you have your microphone turned on. There we go.
You hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
Mr. Moore is excused. Mr. Simon.
Here.
Mr. Harrison.
Here.
Ms. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Caulfield.
Here.
And Mr. Vieira.
Here.
Okay.
Okay, we have the minutes of the August 18th meeting. I just have a couple of corrections on page 3, lines 22 and 23. It should say present for the application were, and it should be Harold, not Harry, and Kelley Reynolds.
Okay.
Anyone else with any other changes to those minutes?
Move approval of the minutes as corrected.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain. Mr. Caulfield.
Okay, and we have the resolution for the Reynolds property on Lorraine Avenue. I have a couple corrections on that. No. Last whereas, after it says testimony presented, but
On page 2, right?
no, page 1. Oh, the last whereas in page 1, sorry.
Okay.
Where it says review the testimony presented and put in by the applicant and the members of the public. And
Okay.
then number 3, after it says 179 feet of frontage along Lorraine Avenue, put in and 171 feet of frontage along Haddon Place.
171 feet of frontage along Haddon Place. Okay.
Anyone else with any other changes to that resolution? Not, would someone like to make a motion?
Move approval of the resolution as corrected.
Second.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Then I don't have any changes to the resolution for the Farrell property on Alexander Avenue. Does anyone else have any changes?
Move approval as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Let Janice, you can pick. All
Yeah.
in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain. Abstain.
Janice, do you want to announce the postponement?
Yeah, we received a letter yesterday from the attorney for application 2747, 268 North Mountain Avenue, requesting that matter be carried to the October 20th Zoning Board of Adjustment meeting. So they will not be heard this evening.
And okay, and then Janice, the at the last meeting, according to the minutes, we announced the Montclair Foundation application was being carried to this meeting. And
Yes.
they're not on the agenda. What became of them?
They requested, I should have, it was on the agenda, and then they requested that that application also be carried to the October 20th meeting.
So,
And they will have to notice because I had them on the agenda and they had not completed their notice before.
there will be notice of that application provided to members of the public.
Right.
Okay. The first application is the continuation of the public hearing for 63 Park Street Montclair LLC for property not surprisingly at 63 Park Street. Ms. John Baster, you ready to go?
Let me, I made Miss John Basta a panelist. So you should be able to, if you turn on your microphone, you should be able to speak and let me know who else you want to bring for testimony tonight.
Okay, there I am. Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. So
Okay.
we are, in light of the fact that there's only 6 board members, would it be possible for us to carry to October 6th with the hopes that a full complement of the board would be available?
We're canceling the October 6th meeting.
Okay.
So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to proceed that night. So it's October 20th if you want to proceed for the vote.
Would it be possible then to proceed with our presentation tonight and then decide at the end of our presentation whether we defer the vote until the October 20th meeting to allow an opportunity for other members to read the transcript?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, then I think we will go ahead and proceed.
Okay.
So the people that we will be calling this evening are Paul Anderson, if you want to call them up. Paul Anderson, Ryan Robertson, Jackson Bangs, and Justin Ostilio.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you. So to begin, for the record, my name is Lisa John Boss with the law firm Keys, Shahinian and Jan Tomasi on behalf of the applicant. As the board will recall, we appeared before it in August in order to renovate the existing Red Cross building and add additions thereto in order to change the use to residential and an office use. After hearing the board's feedback, we were able to revise the plans into what we hope is a more palatable plan for the board and a better plan from a design perspective. What we did in short, and it'll be talked about in greater detail by professionals, is to pull back the side yard setback where the multi-story building was oriented to comply with the 20-foot side yard setback requirement. That effectively reduced the office space slightly. We also reduced the number of residential units from 10 units to 9 units. And there's also a decrease in impervious coverage as well as building coverage as a result of the modifications that we made. To discuss the application, just for order of presentation, we intend to call Paul Anderson, who's our civil engineer. We then will call Justin Bangs of Sionis Architecture to discuss the landscaping aspects, and then Ryan Robertson to discuss the architectural revisions to the building itself, and finally, Justin Ostilio, who's our professional planner. If it's okay with the board, I'd like to call our first witness.
Okay, Mr. Anderson, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Paul, I think you don't have your microphone turned on, Paul. Okay, Paul. Nope. Paul, we should be able to hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Yes, I do.
All right, would you state your name and address, please?
Paul W. Anderson, Anderson, 40 Miller Drive, Boonton, New Jersey.
Thank you, Paul. If you please could very briefly go through your educational and professional background for the board.
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Clarkson University, 1983. I'm licensed as a professional engineer in the state of New Jersey since 1988. And I have been accepted as an expert witness before this board previously and many other boards throughout the state of New Jersey as a professional engineer and professional planner. Tonight I'll be talking about engineering. I am the principal with Anderson Consulting Services. We prepared the site plans that are before you this evening.
And your license is still current in civil engineering?
Yes, it is.
I ask that you please be accepted as an expert in civil engineering.
Okay.
Thank you. Paul,
Thank
if you could start by discussing the site aspects and the revisions to the plans that have been made since the last time the applicant appeared before the board.
Certainly. Previously, we had an addition of 900 square feet on the proposed structure, and that has been reduced to 337 square feet. And as mentioned in the introduction, that has allowed us to increase the side yard setback to the addition that is proposed from 7.8 feet to 20 feet. And that is a conforming setback in this zone. We also reduced some of the parking in the front and that was in front of the building. So the reduction in the addition and the parking has changed the impervious coverage by 4.8% from what we had before the board last time we were there. The zone permits 70% impervious coverage, which is in this case 18,591 square feet. We previously had proposed a conforming 64.4% or 17,105. But with the reductions that we've made with this current submission, we have 59.6%, which is 15,828. So this is actually a reduction of impervious coverage from what is there existing today. Existing today is 62%, and we're going down to 59.6. And the impervious calculation that I've completed on this actually includes the pervious pavers that we're proposing as impervious. So there's, it's a somewhat a conservative analysis in terms of how much impervious that we have. All in all, we're 10.4% under what is permitted in the OR3 zone. So there's a significant reduction in impervious coverage. If we look at building coverage with the change in the addition, we're reducing it 2.5% from our previous proposal, what we had at the board last time. The ordinance permits 40%, which is 10,623 square feet. We previously had proposed 22.4%, 53.6 square feet. And our current proposal is down to 19.9% or 5,290 square feet. So this is 20.1% below the coverage that is permitted in the OR3 zone. We do need a variance for building height. The addition as proposed for the building matched the existing ridge line of the structure itself. And where we have some, so we have the existing height of the building, though, exceeds the limit at 38.4 feet, where 35 feet is permitted in the zone. The proposed is 38.93, but that is simply somewhat of a technicality in that the average grade around the building, once we connect the garage structure in the back, which has lower existing grades around it, changes the average grade slightly lower. So you have about a 6-inch change in the building height based on the calculation method. But what you'll see from Park Street is a ridge line that is exactly the height that it is today. So if you look at the drawing is on the screen, you'll see a hatched area of the driveway coming in. And if you know the existing site, you'll know that There is existing diagonal parking to the right of that driveway as you're looking at the plan. And we were previously going to reuse that parking as compact parking spaces. We had proposed 23 parking spaces, but we removed 4 of the compact parking stalls. And now we only have 19 parking spaces proposed, 1 of which is compact. And that allows for us to have a wider aisle. There we have a 22-foot aisle in the area that is coming from Park Street to the back of the parking lot, and we have a 24.6-foot aisle in the back. Functionally, a 22-foot aisle is below your standard. It does work in terms of most cars today are smaller than what you see on the turning templates, and what is required for 22 feet will make it with most small cars. If you have a larger car like a Suburban or something of that nature, it might have to do it in 2 moves, but it's still a very functional parking space, and that would be the basically for 6 spaces that come down. After that, the rest of them have adequate aisle space behind them. The number of parking spaces we propose is 19. The ordinance requires the greater of what is required for the office or what is required for residential. In this case, the residential is the controlling ordinance, 17.6 spaces, or actually so it would be 18. But also there is a new statute out that says if you provide vehicle charging stations, which we have 2, 1 on either side of the handicap spaces in the back of the building, then you can reduce it by, you can count those as 2 spaces. So we can reduce 2 from that, making the requirement for this project 16. We're still providing 19. So previously it was discussed with the board that we were going to assign parking spaces, and we rethought that position. And we decided to make it a first come, first serve on the parking spaces. We do think this will work very, very well since residential parking and commercial parking tend to have different peak demands. So we think that there'll be plenty of spaces available for everyone during the day and during the evening. We do have the extra 3 spaces as noted. Based on this, I think that the parking that we have provided on site with 19 spaces exceeding what the ordinance requires is adequate for this project. The parking itself has several minor technicalities associated with it that do not meet the Montclair standards. We are proposing 9 by 18 spaces when 9 by 19 spaces are required. 9 by 18 spaces are acceptable, virtually everywhere. They're a standard space size. We only have 1 as a compact at 9 by 17, but we have 9 by 18 throughout. And in almost all cases, we have a 2-foot, actually in all cases, we have a 2-foot overhang. So we actually could use the provision of the ordinance which says that you can reduce it to a 17.5-foot length. In the rear next to the building, we have a 6-foot wide sidewalk. And if we use a 2-foot overhang in that location, you'll still have 4-foot clear to pass on the sidewalk. On the parking spaces in the rear that face the municipal building, we have approximately 4 feet over where it will have some minor shrubs, but it is basically allows the 2-foot overhang. And the most constrained is the ones that are next to the synagogue, and those the curb line is 3 feet from the property line, and a 2-foot overhang will fit there. So you do have the sufficient space for that. However, there is a buffer requirement too in terms of parking setback. which you require in your ordinance 4 feet. That is already 3 to the curb line, but if you count the distance from the overhang, it's 1 foot. So that row of parking is non-compliant in their parking buffer, but we believe it'll function very well, and it doesn't shine in. Wouldn't create any problem with the synagogue next door in terms of shining in windows and things like that. As I mentioned, in the back by the 2 handicap spaces, I showed 2 small squares, and they're on the dividing line between the handicap spaces and the spaces next door. Those are intended to be the electric charging stations. And I thought I had them labeled. If I don't, I'm sorry, but that's what they are intended to be. I selected that location to be between spaces so it doesn't impact the overhang, and also so that vehicles that were in the handicap spaces as well as the space next door could use the electrical charging station. So you could actually serve 4 spaces with that electrical charging. There was some question previously about the location of the ADA parking stalls. I believe the location that we have is the best location, and it's compliant with the ADA requirements. There's a side door that goes into an elevator for the residential upstairs. There's no way to use the parking spaces 17, 18, or 19 for that because there's a minor grade differential there. So there's about a 2-foot high retaining wall, and the people who were using those spaces would have to come all the way down to the end to get behind the retaining wall anyway. And then in addition to that, the slope on those on the asphalt in that area is 3.5%, which exceeds the slope requirement that ADA permits. So we have the parking spaces in the back, which have an access ramp and a relatively flat sidewalk, meeting all the slope requirements, going right to the lobby where the elevator can get them to the upper stories. And I believe that this is the closest, most convenient place for the ADA to access the building. We talked about the driveway width. There was the wall that I was just speaking about that goes along the driveway. There was a comment request for a detail of that wall, and we will provide that if the board sees fit to approve the application. We will provide that as a condition of approval. There's a question about the monument sign that we show in the front yard. The intention of that is to have that a completely conforming sign. It needs to be, I believe, 4 feet off the property line. It currently is 9. And the area and all the other, the intention is to be completely conforming. No relief would be requested for the sign itself. There was some comments regarding the lighting. If I could go to the lighting plan.
Which sheet is that?
It's probably 5 or 6. It's back a little bit more.
And Mr. Anderson, you're making comments, kind of, we're not sure what you're addressing exactly. So I think if you're going to say, for example, you're addressing comment 3 in the Suburban Consulting Engineer report, you should tell us. If you're responding to Ms. Talley's memo, she had 3 comments, you should tell us so we can kind of keep track of where we are.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. I will do that. So there was a lighting comment, I believe it's in Suburban Consulting. So I can find the number.
Mr. Sullivan, I believe that the lighting comment related to the prior planning letter that was issued by Ms. Talley. That,
Well, let me ask you, okay, so let's start with, I assume you have the September 17 report from Suburban Consulting, correct?
I do.
And I assume you have Ms. Talley's September 13 memo, is that correct?
That is correct. All right, so so basically the comment in the original letter was that the lights have to be 2.5 feet off the pavement, and they have to be at the center, but between two parking spaces. We have one light that would need to be relocated. It's the C light that's at the bottom of the page on the left side, approximately 3 feet to the left, the other one. And the one, yeah, and that would not impact the lighting intensity on the municipal parking lot or the design on site in any significant way. We would still meet the lighting standard. So we can meet that comment that was on the original planning memo that was provided for the project. So the next thing I want to talk about, I'm trying to find the location in the report, if you don't mind. Give me just a moment. Is that there's a question about the utilities. There's a comment in the Suburban Consulting report indicating that we should verify that no new utilities are needed. Our intention is to use the existing sewer lateral, existing gas service, and existing water service to the building. And so we do not propose anything new there. The only thing that we do propose that's new is to take an electrical service from the pole line that's in the back, which is shown on the drawing that's on the screen now, and run it underground to the transformer in the front of the property, and then into the building. So its location will be determined primarily by the electrical company, but our intention is to put it, in that location. That's what we're going to be asking them to do.
that was comment number 16.
Thank you. With regard to the stormwater comments that is in the Suburban Consulting report, he notes that it is not a major project any longer. I concur. It's also not a minor project. The minor project in the Montclair ordinance requires an increase in 250 square feet of impervious. And as I previously testified, we have a reduction in impervious for the site. So this is a project that does not really have any requirements for stormwater other than what is best practices for the site in particular. And with that in mind, I have designed, there is no positive discharge point from this site. There's no water drainage system that goes through an easement through the municipal lot. The back of the lot is lower than Park Street, so we cannot get to a storm drainage system in Park Street. So we have to mimic somewhat what I anticipate is going on today in the lot. Although there's nothing that we could actually discover, I think that there is some kind of recharge into the ground at that point. So we're going to mimic that. We're going to provide stormwater management for what is approximately 3 gallons per square foot of total impervious on the site, including the existing. So we would actually be exceeding that. And the reason we are doing that is the water all has nowhere to go except for into the ground. And we want to make sure that the parking lot works and drains properly. I did have an opportunity to speak to Mr. Chandler earlier today about the drainage comments and his other comments, and we basically came to the conclusion that we really don't have any significant differences that can't be overcome, with modifications to the plans. It's just a matter of us getting offline and changing it. Nothing that I see in here would change the plan that is in front of you in terms of any variance relief or anything like that.
So is it your testimony that you'd be able to comply with all the comments within the Suburban Consulting Engineering letter dated September 17th, 2021?
That is correct.
Thank you.
So as I look at this, we have a project in the R3 zone that meets and actually meets the building coverage requirements, significantly less than what is permitted. It has less impervious coverage than is permitted. It matches the existing building height and will appear, the same height from Park Street. The parking is conforming in number, and there's only minor deviations in dimensional requirements of the parking. We're providing 2 electrical charging stations, and the stormwater exceeds the requirements set forth in the ordinance. I believe that the project is, well designed with minor tweaking to be done in conformance, working with the board's professionals. And that's the testimony that I have for you this evening. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, Mr. Fleischer, do you have any questions?
I guess the biggest question I have is the issue of the buffer between the parking and the property lines still. And I'm not sure what or if there's a solution to it, particularly on the side where the synagogue is to the north, given the tightness. But I still feel like from a site development perspective, the site is overcrowded, but that's just a general type of comment that I have no specific detail to offer or any questions to ask.
Yeah, a lot of that parking, Mr. Fleshman, is existing parking. It's already there. We're just reorganizing it on the existing asphalt.
I understand. It just doesn't meet the requirements of the buffer, which we'd like to have. But other than that, I'm not going to comment any further at this point.
Okay, Mr. Church, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, no.
Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
No, I don't really have any questions. I'm a little bit confused in terms of, because there's so much information shared with us as to which variances are actually before us for this meeting.
Is John Best, I assume your planner is going to go through the variances that are still required and
Yes, that's correct. And if you wanted me to just go through it briefly, we do need a D3 variance, which is to deviate from a condition of a conditional use, which does not permit residential on the first floor.
Okay.
We need the D6 height variance because we are exceeding the maximum permissible height by more than 10%.
Okay.
And as well as a C variance because what's permitted in the zone is a 2.5 story building. And 4 stories is proposed. We also need a minimum side yard and rear yard variance, which is only solely due to the function of connecting the existing garage to the building. We're not making any modifications to that structure, but because it's now attached to the building, no longer accessory structure, it's a principal structure, the deviations are triggered. And that is the totality of the variance relief required.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Mr. Simon, do you have any questions?
Questions?
Ms. Harris, do you have any questions?
Point out the electric vehicle charging stations. It's a little bit hard to see on the plan.
They are. I'm sorry. I should call them. Yeah, Janice, if you could focus in. So, yeah,
I think that's it, right? These
Those two
squares. here?
rectangles are the vehicle charging stations between parking spaces and available to any of the spaces between 1 and 4.
Okay. And do you
And
have
the
any
entire
details?
lot will be wired will have conduit for the vehicle charging also. It's just that the actual installation will be done at the beginning in these 2 locations.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
So the entire parking lot will have conduit available so that the wiring can be run at a later date when other vehicle charging stations are added.
Okay, thank you. And then do you have any details of the station, like what's the width of the sidewalk available in those areas?
Well, that's a 6-foot wide sidewalk. And we have, we're already accounting for a 2-foot car overhang. And we have, 4 feet behind it, I believe we're going to have for this. We do not have a model picked out. I don't think it's going to encroach on the width of the sidewalk any more than the 2 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Vieira, do you have any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have a specific question for Mr. Anderson regarding comment 11, regarding the stormwater management, where your drawing shows the dry well is connected to the parking lot, because I see an inlet. Can you reconcile that comment to your drawing? Because I'm a little confused if that's the case, or what is your recommendation?
So the project with number 11, we have an inlet with a sump and a trap. So basically that has a depression that's lower in the inlet that's lower than the outlet pipe. So sediment from like sand in the parking lot go into the inlet, and then they cannot go out. They fill the sump before it doesn't just it doesn't run grit and so forth into the dry well. It also has a trap also, which prevents solids and oil and from getting into it. It allows water to stay in there. It keeps the oil from running into the groundwater and recharging it to the ground. So, and as I mentioned before, this is all sized in excess of what needs to be on a site per your ordinance. But all the water from the impervious areas on site will be directed to these 6 dry wells that we have under the ground.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anderson. And I get this. The second question is, I'm satisfied with that answer. The second question I had is regarding the ADA parking spaces. So question number 8, you mentioned that the current slope exceeds the ADA requirement. Can you clarify that, or I misunderstood that statement?
So there was a comment at the last meeting that could we move the parking spaces from these 2 that are now circled on the screen from there over to the side access door where the residents will make most of their entrances. And I was simply pointing out that there's a little retaining wall there that's a few feet high that is between those parking spaces in there, so they can't go directly there. They have to go all the way back to the back corner of the building where the retaining wall ends and around. So those spaces would not be convenient. In addition to them not being convenient or the closest spaces or the closest path to the building, they also have a slope of approximately 3 or 3.5%. And you can't exceed 2% for ADA standards And so they aren't conforming slope-wise. In order to make them conforming slope-wise, we'd be regrading the entire parking lot. And it just seems a lot simpler to go back where you can go in and then you have the commercial doorways in the back that are right near where these ADA spaces are. And you have a level walkway that goes all the way from the ADA spaces around the corner to the elevator, to the lobby where the elevator is for the residential. And to me, that seemed like the most convenient and most compliant with the ADA code.
Okay, thank you. And so, just so I understand correctly, the walkway that is behind, or between the building and the retaining wall, what's the slope of that walkway?
It's less than 1%.
Okay. All right, I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, I have a number of questions. First, I'm going to return to the issue Mr. Fleischer raised concerning the parking spaces along the Temple side of the property. And because the landscaping plans are part of the architectural plans and aren't shown on your site plan, I'm trying to reconcile the two. So the edge of the pavement is going how close to the property line?
Base of curve is 3 feet.
Okay, and you are relying on a 2-foot overhang over that curb for the parking spaces?
Only for compliance with the ordinance. I don't think we need to, but the ordinance requires 9 by 19. And one of the justifications is you have an overhang. I do know that the landscape plan that Jackson will go over after, when he does his testimony, we'll discuss the buffer in that area in detail.
But there would be the ability for cars, if larger cars park there, that they would be able to pull 2 feet, have their front end 2 feet over the curb line. Is that correct?
It is. They would probably at that point be hitting some of the shrubs that are planted.
That's obviously my issue, and I'll go over that with him in terms of the plantings that are proposed there. And but it's there seem to be two kinds of cars in the world these days: small ones and large ones. And the standard size car is not too common. And just in terms of my parking in various lots around town, there are a lot of larger size cars. I want to then go over
that there is a possibility that we only have one compact space. We could assign some of them as compact spaces to eliminate some of your concern with them running into the shrubs, and try to keep the Suburbans and other larger vehicles parked in the back. I forget what the percentage of compact cars are, but I think it would take up a good number of those ones that you're concerned with.
because well, okay. So I mean, but the ordinance, where the provision concerning the overhang says that the overhang is unobstructed, and obviously if there's shrubbery in that area, I would not consider that unobstructed.
So then we would get back to needing the relief for the parking size at 9 by 18 without an overhang.
I'm going through, because you kind of skipped around on the engineer's memo. Just bear with me as I'm making sure I don't skip any that were not addressed. Okay, there's a comment number 7 that says, as to the stairs on the side of the building, that you should provide a detail, including elevations. Have you done that?
I have not. That, the stairs and the retaining wall are things that we would address details of, you know, as a condition of approval. It's really more of a building permit kind of thing, but if the board wants to see it, we can provide it. They're basically standard precast stairs.
And I want to follow up on Mr. Vieira's questions. I partially understood what you were saying. I mean, the stormwater best management practices preclude you using the dry wells for stormwater runoff from the parking lot. My understanding of your testimony is you're addressing that by the inlet, and that is filtering out solids, whatever, that are coming in. So it's just going to be water that's going into the dry wells. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, but the inlet is located away from that whole area of the parking lot that drain, that is by the parking spaces bordering the municipal lot and the handicap spaces and the electrical vehicle charging spaces. Isn't that area going to drain directly into where the dry wells are?
No, they'll go to the inlet that's behind the dry wells, which also has a sump and a trap.
Okay, so
the one that's in the driveway collects primarily the flow that goes down the driveway. And then the lion's share of the flow would be collected at the low point. That's at that second one that was circled in the back next to the municipal lot.
right, where I'm struggling a little on that is your contours kind of disappear.
Yeah.
You know, I'm following it fine going down the driveway, but I'm not seeing where that entire area is going to flow into that inlet. And I guess part of the concern is it's going to end up flowing into the municipal lot.
No, well, we have a curb line there that keep it from overflowing. It's just, it'll be a lot. There's a very small inlet there today that seems to be doing basically the same thing, only we're putting a standard B inlet grate, which is much bigger than what's there, to collect the water and setting that as the low point in the parking lot. And so that's how we're doing it. We're making it much better than it is currently today. And I haven't seen any evidence of this parking lot historically flowing over to the municipal lot. I haven't seen any erosion coming from one to the other. And I think we would see that given some of the storms we've had recently with flow escaping from there. So I think it's going somewhere. I just we haven't dug up a hole and found it. But I think what our plan is duplicating it with something that is enlarged with more capacity to accept the flow and to filter the flow before it goes into the dry wells.
You know, I guess, I mean, part of my concern, I mean, this is, you know, since we seem to keep having these larger, the curbs are 3 inches high or 4 inches high?
6 inches high.
6 inches. So
Yeah.
I still think, you know, in a heavy storm, it's still going to end up flowing over, you know, the inlets aren't going to be able to handle it. What is the outlet from the dry wells?
There's no out, it's just into the ground. There's no discharge. I mean, we are doing this. I mean, I think we have to understand that we're reducing the impervious coverage on site with these improvements and reducing the amount of flow that could potentially go towards the municipal lot. And we don't have any evidence of, even with these massive storms we've had recently, of water ever coming onto the municipal lot and creating any damage from this Red Cross lot. So I think that what we have will not only function, but it'll function in a superior way, and it's even more protection for a municipal lot itself.
Okay. What is the capacity of the dry wells? I guess is,
So I sized it for 2 inches of rainfall over the entire impervious area of the site. So if 2 inches of rainfall happens instantaneously, the volume of the dry wells it'll just go into the dry wells. And you won't see a drop on, you won't see anything on the surface. Okay, now your ordinance has for a minor site, a minor drainage plan, which doesn't apply to this either, 2 gallons per square foot. And this is provides about 50% more volume of storage than that requirement.
when you say it has capacity for 2 inches, I mean, and I guess what happens if the storm is more than 2 inches, since we've had 2 of those in the past month?
Some of it is, well, yes, it's 2 inches on the impervious, all of which would run off and it would fill up and start filling the parking lot up.
To a depth of 6 inches, and then it would
A depth
overflow.
of 6 inches before it discharged next door, correct.
And then okay, so, and you indicated that the existing gas and sanitary connections would be used. The gas I don't have an issue with. But you know, the amount of wastewater flow from this building is going to be significantly more than what it was when the Red Cross was using the building. If you know, looked at the size of the existing sanitary sewer pipe and confirmed that it would handle the flow from both the offices and the residences?
Yes, I have.
And your determination was it is the
It won't even
existing.
flow half full.
I have no further questions. Are there any members of the public who have questions for this witness? And this is just an opportunity to ask questions. There'll be a later opportunity to provide comments. Janet will unmute all the lines, and if you want to say something, speak up. Is there anyone?
I'm trying to unmute everybody, but it's not. For some reason, I don't know why it's not allowing me to unmute you. Do you have your audio turned on? Those of you members of the attendees, members of the public? What I can do is I can temporarily make them panelists, and hopefully that way, if anybody has a comment, they can then make a comment as a panelist. So I'm going to try that since I'm not able to unmute. Okay, members of the public, I have now made you panelists. Do you have any questions, I should say? Mr. Horrigan? I know Ms. Rombauer, you're for the next application.
Mr. Hargan's with us. He's on our team.
Yeah, okay. I don't think we have any questions.
Okay. Is John Bass, do you want to call your next witness?
Yes, please. Our next witness is Jackson Bangs with Sionis Architecture.
Mr. Banks, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth of the matter pending before the board?
Jackson, do you have there you go. Okay.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I do swear to tell the truth.
Would you state your name and address, please?
My name's Jackson Bangs, 8 Hillside Avenue, Montclair.
Jackson, have you previously testified before this board and been accepted as an expert in architecture?
I have not previously testified before this board. However, I have testified before the planning board.
Okay. If you can briefly go through your educational and professional background.
Certainly. I received a bachelor's of architecture from the University of Notre Dame in 2012 and have worked at 2 different firms since then, including Sionis Architecture in Montclair for the vast majority of that time. I have testified before boards in both Montclair and Bernardsville, where I was accepted as an expert in the field of architecture.
I say please be accepted as an expert in architecture.
Yes.
Jackson, the scope of your testimony this evening is related to particularly landscaping. You've heard some comments from the board. Can you address the general landscaping plan for this project and what revisions we've made since the last time we appeared before the board?
Yes, I would be happy to do that. We've prepared a PowerPoint presentation that will include slides that I'll be discussing, as well as slides that my colleague Ryan Robertson and our professional planner will also be speaking about.
Okay, I know we marked a previous PowerPoint presentation as Exhibit A1. Janice, were there any other exhibits in your notes?
No.
Okay, so let's mark this as Exhibit A2. And I don't see a date on it, but okay, it's what you're presenting now. There are dates in some of the pages, August 18.
Okay, so A2 would be PowerPoint presentation dated August 18th.
I
Correct.
think that was the date of the original presentation.
Yes, some of the slides we included the original presentation for reference at the end of this presentation, just for convenience. So some of that date appears on some of those slides.
Okay, I do see on the landscape plan, there is a revision date of September 10, 2021. Let's go with that date.
Thank you.
Okay. Jackson, if you could discuss the landscaping.
Certainly. So as Paul Anderson described, we've reduced the size of the building and of the parking area, which has resulted in an increased amount of green space available for landscaping.
Jackson, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm going to. Is there a particular slide that shows the landscaping plan well on this slide presentation?
Yes, the next one. Oh, actually not the next one. So I apologize. So before we look at the landscaping plan, I just want to remind the members of the board that this site currently is very densely planted with a lot of vegetation. Many of these trees and other shrubs, as you can see from the images here, are volunteers. They're also rather overgrown, and they're encroaching on both the building and the parking in some areas. So we're going to thin this out in some areas and supplement these existing plants with a total of 752 new ones, a mixture of trees, shrubs, and ground cover. This is an increase from the amount that was proposed previously to account for the increase in green space. Next slide. So as Paul explained in the last hearing, all of the plants that are proposed are native to the Essex County area, and they've been selected for drought tolerance and deer resistance. We've called for a mixture of deciduous and evergreen plants, and have chosen many that flower at various times of year. All of the new plants comply with these same guidelines as well. You will see that, as Paul Anderson testified to, where parking was eliminated from the northern side yard, we now have a larger landscaped area behind the potential location for an electrical transformer, which may or may not be needed. We don't know if that will be necessary yet. That's largely up to PSE&G. But if it is, we've proposed plantings for that area that will screen it nicely. So the change in this area that you'll see is that where we've eliminated parking spaces, we're now proposing one additional willow oak, which will eventually grow to be at least 40 feet tall. And then under and behind this tree, we're proposing a mixture of New Jersey tea and wild geranium plants, which flower in late spring and early summer. They'll provide nice ground cover in that landscaped area. Moving eastward along the property line, we're proposing a row of shamrock inkberry, which is going to grow to be about 3 to 4 feet tall. It's an evergreen, and it will help shield headlights from cars that are parking as they're pulling into that area. Jumping to the opposite side of the property, in the southern side yard, we have a lot more space available than we did previously. So several of the plants that we've added there are intended to help soften that wall of the building and provide some screening for portions of it. Next slide, please. So I'd like to draw your attention to two specific plants, both of which we're using for this screening that I was describing. The one on the left is the American holly. That's represented in the landscape plan by an IO symbol. That we're proposing 7 of those along the southerly property line, which will soften the view of the proposed addition, and in time, as they grow to be 7 to 8 feet tall, they'll hide a good deal of the first floor from somebody who's standing at the lot currently occupied by the former PNC Bank, or from someone walking along the sidewalk on Claremont Avenue. Other lower plantings that are shown on the landscape plan will add interest and further soften the building edge where it meets the ground. The plant on the right-hand side, the Brody Eastern Red Cedar, which is marked with a JV on the site plan, will screen views of our parking lot from the existing municipal building parking lot, and vice versa, which will be nice for people on both sides of the property line. We're also proposing 7 of them adjacent to the synagogue in the vicinity of the transformer I was discussing previously. I know that there were some concerns raised about this plant in August, given that it can grow to be very full and that it may require some trimming periodically. We view this as an asset, not a liability, because it will help the plant provide more full and better screening for the cars and the headlights. And all plants and all landscaping require maintenance, and our clients plan to hold on to this property, and they'll prune and take care of the landscaping as any diligent property owner would. Could we go back to the previous slide, please? So that summarizes the changes and items that were discussed about the plantings proposed here. I'd be happy to answer any further questions that the board members may have.
I have a question, Bill.
Mr. Fleischer, do you have any questions?
Can we sort of hone in on the area at the intersection where the building and the office building sort of meet in the parking lot? I'm not sure I understand what the plantings are that are shown there.
You mean here?
Yeah, any one of those, what I'll call those corner islands, what are those there?
The areas under those trees.
Well, what I'm trying to find out, well, no, I'm talking about right in the parking lot where the, yeah, that area that's being served by Janice.
Yeah, so the tree is an American yellowwood tree. And then underneath of it, we are calling for, let me see, AU, which is,
Bearberry.
yeah, thank
What
you.
about the 4 IGs? What are those?
IG is the shamrock inkberry, which is the same plant that we're calling for along the northerly property
And
line.
what's the size of those plants?
3 to 4 feet at full maturity.
I guess my question there is, and I could ask that same question about parking item 10, but in that place, for example, how does a driver open their door? How does it, you have the spot there, you have the plants, you have a normal or regular size, how does anybody get out of their car on the left-hand side, which is where people would normally go if they were trying to open the driver's side door if they fronted into the spot? I'm just interested in how that would work. In a sense, you do it on the other side as well, on the lower side. And how does a passenger get out of the car? I'm not sure that the plants aren't too tight right up against the parking itself. And I know it looks like you're trying to put a nice little table and chair in there so someone can sit outside, and that's great, but how does the parking lot get used? And just as a quick sort of follow-up to that, we talked about unassigned spaces. So how do we know how these spaces are going to be used relative to the inhabitants of the building? Not everybody takes their car to work, so a lot of these vehicles may be there during the day. I'm just trying to understand how it's structured in order to accommodate all the parking that's required primarily by the residential building.
We can certainly consider alternate plantings in that area. You make a good point about access to car doors.
And the same thing happens next to the dumpster. And the same thing happens essentially every place where you put these plantings tied in against the parking spaces. So I do have a concern about that. That would be space 19.
Yeah, and
space
11.
4, 1, I guess it's 5, 10. I mean, there's a whole bunch of them that all have that same problem of being right up against the plantings.
We would be happy to rework the planting layout in order to move plants a good foot away from the curb line or so, just to allow for door flow.
Okay. I think that's my questions for now. I have a broader question when we get to the architectural thing about why the buildings, these two structures really need to be connected at the ground level. And there's an opportunity to allow people to sort of flow through into the planted areas on the south side of the residential building, which in a sense they can technically do now because there's no connection between those two office components. But I'll leave that for the architectural questions. That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Church, do you have any questions?
No questions at this time, thank you.
Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Simon, do you have any questions? Okay, Ms. Harris, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Vieira, do you have any questions?
No questions at the moment.
Okay. I have some. I want to follow up on what I was asking the engineer in terms of the inkberry that are along the northern property line as to How far from the property line would those actually be planted?
Well, there's 3 feet available, so presumably we would plant them somewhere right in the middle, about 1.5 feet off of the property line.
And how broad do the inkberry typically grow?
Off the top of my head, not sure, but I can look into that. I think they're generally slightly less wide than they are tall, but about 3 feet or so. So they would fill the area.
So if the cars were relying on an overhang, by definition, they would be hitting the bushes. Is that correct?
Yes. As Paul Anderson said, it seems unlikely that most cars would really need that overhang, but if they did, they would hit the bush.
I'm somewhat fascinated. I'm now on the eastern property line in the red cedars. I'm somewhat fascinated. I mean, those were very nice pictures you showed of red cedars, and that certainly look what they look like when they're young. But I question whether trimming them will actually enhance their screening ability at, and it's the same basic question. I assume those would be planted basically in the middle of the space between the property line and the parking lot, and I'm just not, would be surprised if they retain the thick vegetation at the bottom as you prune them. It's just not been my observation as to what happens. I think they tend to thin out, and particularly with pruning when they're not maintaining their natural, pyramidal type shape. And partially, and then behind the existing garage, I mean, my first question, which may not be for you, but there are currently 4 windows in the rear of the garage. Or is that staying the same, or is there any changes in the windows?
It's staying the same.
Okay, and at this point, you're just proposing the sedge being planted back there?
Yes.
No actual screening, I guess, is.
No, it's an existing very low wall. We think it's rather attractive, plain.
And what would be required for the maintenance of that area?
Occasional painting.
No, and not the building, the
The landscaping. Fairly minimal.
I have no further questions. Are there any members of the public who have questions? We will, in some form, unmute you again and give you an opportunity to ask questions of this witness.
That's Ms. Rambo again. Do you have any questions? She's our only member of the public.
Ms.
Jackson,
Johnson?
just a follow-up question. Jackson, based on the comments of the chair, if the board required or requested that a different tree be planted near that municipal boundary line or in any other location, would the applicant be amenable to doing that?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Ms. John Bass, do you want to call your next witness?
Yes, our next witness is Ryan Robertson, also with Sionis Architecture.
Okay, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
Ryan Robertson, 8 Hillside Avenue, Montclair, New Jersey.
Ryan, if you could briefly go through your educational and professional background.
Sure. I got a Bachelor of Architecture from North Dakota State University in 2003. I'm a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey. I've worked for several years with Paul Sionis, and I've been accepted as an expert before this board.
ISA be accepted as an expert in architecture.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Ryan.
Okay, Janice, would you go a couple slides? I think it was the one after the trees. maybe 2 slides forward. Yeah, right here. We'll start here. So I'll start with just a general overview of the architectural modifications that happened as a result of our addition complying with the 20-foot setback at the south. We reduced the size of the addition, so you can see the addition's impact highlighted in blue here on the ground floor. We've opted to keep the connection at the garage, but I know this was just brought up by Mr. Fleischer, so we can discuss that a little further about what if we didn't connect. But when we decided to set back, we saw that we still were able to, you can see that slope where it connects. That is actually the line of the 20-foot setback, and the rest of it's perpendicular. So we chose to keep it because the option was there. But we can talk about that further in the questions and comments. Setting it back to that, we then had to modify some of the office spaces a little bit. We eliminated a rental office that was previously shown and reconfigured the residential storage spaces on this floor. And then the other impact of our redesign is that we went from 10 dwelling units to 9. So just to kind of talk about the numbers a little bit, the addition you see there shaded in blue previously was shown as 900 square feet. What you see now is 337. That's a decrease of 563 square feet. We lost 1 residential unit from 10 to 9. The office space was previously shown calculated to be 2,879 square feet, and now it's 2,787 square feet, a reduction of 92 square feet. Janice, you can go to the next slide, please. First floor plan, as you can see here, units 101, 102, and 103 have been modified, but unit 104 stayed the same. We tried to make sure that each unit could have an outdoor area, either a patio or a terrace or a balcony. I guess I will jump ahead a little bit to talk about unit 102 is showing that terrace. That would be unit 102's only outdoor space, and I think we would need to remove that if we didn't connect. That would probably be the only impact architecturally. They could no longer have one office tenant. I guess that's the other impact. Or they would have to have kind of 2 separate buildings. And when we get to questions, and maybe bring Jackson back because he did study the variances in detail, and I believe he'll have to testify to this. I believe another variance may be triggered if we don't connect buildings.
Yeah,
I'll put it
I
in
can
that.
state that as well. So this zone does not permit more than 1 principal structure on the lot. So if the building is not connected, we would need an additional variance for that.
Right. Okay. So I think if we were to be granted that variance instead, the applicant would be open to disconnecting and losing this terrace. And then to go into the details a little bit about each of these units, 101 will remain a 2-bed, 2-bath. It increased in size from 1,025 square feet to 1,046. Unit 102, this was the biggest change probably on the plans. It was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath at 1,355 square feet, but it's been modified to be a 2-bed, 2.5-bath, and a den at 1,900 square feet and 1,904 square feet, and it's a 2-story unit. It's the biggest unit. Unit 103 was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath at 879 square feet, and it's been modified to be 2-bedroom, 2-bath now with 1,070 square feet. And as I said earlier, unit 204 had no change. It was a 1-bedroom, 1-bath. It's remaining so at 784 square feet. Next slide, please, Janice. The second floor here, unit 201 has been slightly enlarged. Unit 202 is missing now because that's shown where unit 102 is shown, which became a 2-story unit. So the blue arrows to each unit, you see there's no longer a blue arrow leading into what was previously 202, right kind of north of that elevator. And again, you can see that each unit still has a outdoor terrace. Unit 102, we're seeing the terrace below, so it's not happening up at this level. And here for unit 201, it will remain a 2-bedroom, 2-bath from what was previously shown, increased in size from 1,024 square feet to 1,035 square feet. Unit 2 I mentioned was eliminated. That was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,544 square feet. Unit 203 remains a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, and it increased slightly from 1,500 to 1,502 square feet. And next slide, please. Third floor modifications. Unit 301 remained unchanged. Unit 302 has been reduced in size, and Unit 303 has been enlarged. So Unit 301 remains a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, decreased in size a little bit from 1,128 square feet to 1,120. Unit 302 was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath with a den, decent sized unit at 1,448, but we had to reduce that to a 1-bedroom, 1-bath at 926. I think that's our smallest unit. And Unit 303 was a 2-bedroom, 2-bath at 990 square feet, and it's been modified to be a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,139 square feet. And this is the unit that we've selected to be the affordable unit. It's the 3rd largest of the 2-bedroom units. And I have all those numbers. We can go through those if we need to, if there's questions about the sizes of the 2 bedrooms. But I verified that this is the 3rd largest of those. And so for the total unit mix, we have 7 2-bedrooms and 2 1-bedrooms. I think we can go to the next slide, please. This will just be a roof plan showing the change to do this 20-foot setback, and the area highlighted in blue is the roof screening, which has been reconfigured a little bit and reduced slightly to lose 1 unit. Next slide, please. So this is the west elevation with the view from Park Street, and as you can see, the width of the addition to the right has been set back further from the south now. You can see part of that addition in this view, and it is back 36 feet from the face of the existing structure. Reducing the addition also exposes more of the view of that existing garage that you can see, which is even further back in the distance seen from Park Street. Next elevation, please. This is the north. There's no visible change here. Everything remains the same. Next slide, please. East elevation, the only change here is to the left, where the addition was much longer and now it's cut back. That's happening behind the garage, and you can see the railing of the balcony that we were talking about earlier, and a window that connects below that. Next slide, please. This is the south elevation. The changes here, mostly there were some window changes to reconfigure for the layout in Unit 102. Mr. Harrison actually asked a question earlier about windows in the garage, and I think Jackson said they weren't changing, but I want to correct that. We did add one in the middle there. That was a request that's happened since the last time you saw this, I believe. But the other windows are existing locations. And then the addition, if you can kind of see where the addition is, previously to the west of that, towards Park Street, there were some balconies shown, which now are removed. Next slide, please. And so those porches that I just mentioned were shown in this view, which was previously presented by Paul Sionis, showed some balconies, and the addition came closer to this driveway where the person holding the camera is standing in this view. And the portraits sort of drew attention to themselves, I think, and the elimination of it, I think, really helps give the visual balance now to this. The addition, it feels less obtrusive, and it lets the half timbering portion of the existing Tudor structure kind of remain a focal point on Park Street. So we feel that the addition uses similar materials as the existing building while having a style that's in keeping with the spirit of our time and is complementary to the character of the existing historic structure. And the next slide, I think, we'll say the end. Yeah, so that'll conclude. We can open to questions. Maybe we can go back to the last slide.
Hey, Mr. Fleischer, do you have any questions?
When we go back to the ground floor plan, I saw something there that I hadn't really focused on previously.
Mhm.
One more. Yeah, I'm looking at the back of the east side of the professional offices building. What are those 4 piers that are there? And I didn't notice them on the site plan or the areas where the parking is. I'm not sure what those 4 piers are.
So the first floor is cantilevering over. Those are supporting that. You can see that in the elevation. If we go to the,
But how does that work relative to the site plan? That's what I'm trying to ask. Is that an extra section of sidewalk at the site plan, on the site plan? Because we didn't see that. I'm
no,
not talking about your site plan. Yeah, that. Where are those piers?
I think they're shown right there. Mr. Anderson said we have a 6-foot sidewalk there, so they're shown. Yeah, you
Is
can
this
see
it?
them. If you zoom way in, you'll see them. Yeah. Can we get in any closer?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there they are.
Here you
So
see
they
it.
have some pilasters up against the building, Mr. Fleischer, and then the columns are out.
Are those necessary?
We didn't do a structural design. I suppose we could cantilever it. But we haven't run calculations to study that. I know, yeah.
I mean, I can see cars hitting them. I can see a lot of stuff going on there that could happen, not to mention the fact that it narrows the walkway zone. It's one of them, from the looks of it, is right where you said we were getting a charging station, as a matter of fact. The second one from the left side. That was one of the charging stations that was identified.
Yeah, I see that.
So I think it's better if they're not there. Those are being put in now, or they're not existing, are they?
They're not existing. No, this bold line that you see is the existing face of the.
That's what I thought. So these are basically there to hold up what I'll call the first floor of residential.
That's correct.
Known as the first floor, but really is the second floor in the 4-story building, which also led me to some consternation. I mean, I would actually I want to go back to the issue I mentioned about the floor plans. I think for me to feel comfortable with this, I really think that old historic garage needs to be fully separated from this building. Amongst other things, we deal with a much smaller variance with regard to the rear yard requirement if this is an accessory structure as opposed to a primary structure. And I'm not sure how Michael, I don't know, is it automatically become a primary structure because it's being used as something other than a garage or a shed?
Yeah, I think it becomes a principal structure, and I think then we run into a variance for having more than one principal structure on the lot.
I think it's still a better solution, and that's why I'm asking the question whether or not that means we have to renotice because of the other variance, or how does that work? I mean, I'd like to know sort of a sense of that, because I think it would be better to separate that existing historic, what's historic, the old garage structure from the new residential structure, if you will, even though there are some offices in the bottom of this as well. So I don't know what the rules are related to it. I happen to think it would be a better solution. So that's one of my questions. If we go up a little bit in the building to the next floor plan, to me, the building is better for a whole variety of reasons if the building down below follows the line of the walls up above. and really has this clear distinction between this residential building and this bank of offices that are in this old garage structure. You can still have a balcony up there. You can have a small balcony up there off of the living room, dining room, kitchen space, but not as large a balcony as that. There's nothing to stop you from putting a balcony on the next level up instead, but that's a different discussion. So I have some issues with that whole knuckle, that whole connection. And let's go to the next floor where I actually have what I think is a real safety issue, which I think is a mistake and is easily fixed. That laundry room for unit 102, there used to be a door there when it was a separate unit.
Right.
I would urge you, for a whole variety of life safety reasons and other reasons, to put the door back in there. I don't care if you hang clothes in front of it, but it would be great to have a door to exit someone out of that apartment on the second floor in an emergency.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even mention the fact that it'd be a whole lot easier to move furniture and everything else into the unit if they took the furniture up to the second floor in the elevator and came in through that back door. So I would at least request and urge you to put in a second entry door on what is technically the third floor, but the second floor of units.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Otherwise, I think the massing is a whole lot better than it was. I feel very good about it. Again, I think we'd be better off really separating the two office buildings. I also saw some toilets in the office thing. Let's go back down to the ground floor again. I assume those toilets do the toilets exist? They don't exist?
They don't. It's certainly not in the existing garage. I'm trying to think where existing plumbing is in that.
And you also show 4 entry doors into this space, which kind of amazes me. For that very relatively small office area. And you have a whole partition wall, which I don't know will or will not be there. I guess that depends on the tenancy and everything. Is that required structurally or anything else? Or
I think that's an existing masonry CMU wall right there where Janice is. And
you're making the decision in advance to retain that wall? Looks like it almost has a window in it or a pass-through or something.
If I may address that question.
Sure.
Yeah, I made the field visit to the garage when we first visited the site. That is an existing masonry wall that used to be the end of the garage. The garage was smaller originally, and it was enlarged sometime, I believe, in the 1940s, although I might be wrong.
So that was a door and a window from the original garage.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. At least that clarifies it for me. I'm trying to figure out how you make this all work with those 2 toilets, unless you have interior corridors or something that you're proposing, which are not showing on these plans. So I know there were no tenants yet. I know you don't have the space rented out yet for obvious reasons, but it seems a little odd the way it's structured now. And if I was going to put in toilets, I'd put them in against the wall that's between the 2 sections if I was going to do that, and then you can at least have them for both offices. It just seems very strange. It's not about any of the variances we're talking about or anything else. It's about the design itself and whether or not it's needed.
Yeah.
So again, if it was up to me, I think we're better off making a very clear distinction and separation physically and in the massing between this garage structure and the what is essentially the residential building with offices on the lower level. That's all the comments I have.
Thank you.
Mr. Church, do you have any questions?
Just a clarification. I thought I understood that if the linkage between the building and the garage is removed, then a separate variance has to be sought.
That's right.
Am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Even though the two buildings are separated today.
Because, yeah, but it's a different use. If we
Right,
use
so-
it as offices, it becomes an accessory building. You can't have two buildings
No,
on one lot.
Mr. Church, it becomes a second principal building on the lot.
Principal, right, okay. Okay, I understand. Okay, thank you.
Michael,
the
can you explain why it's a principal building?
Because of the office use going in there. It was previously a garage, as I understand it, which is accessory to the principal use.
Okay, thank you.
Now with the, Mike, now with the usage changing, it becomes a principal use.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
If it's not connected. I mean,
Yes.
correct. Does any, we heard Mr. Fleischer's comments. If anybody else has comments with respect to the separation and their preference, we would like to hear that as well, if it's okay with the board.
Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I also want to talk a little bit about the professional office building. Mr. Anderson talked to, about how water would be addressed. And we all know that there was a tremendous volume of water from the tropical storm. And I'm wondering, with these professional offices, since given the slope of the driveway and the parking area where it's located, has consideration been given to the possibility of water getting into those offices? I mean, what's the contingency to try to prevent that from happening?
So I know existing, there's a door that opens right at grade to asphalt with no real transition more than a ½ inch. But with Paul Anderson's site plan, he could testify to the exact height, but he's added a curb. So now what we're going to have is a asphalt that's a little bit lower than what the condition is in those areas. So it'll be the same sort of thing where water will have to go up 5 inches or 6 inches before it would come into the offices.
Let me inject. I'm confused. I mean, he testified the curbs would be 6 inches high and basically the parking lot would flood to that elevation. I mean, the garages are now at grade. I'm trying to understand why the water wouldn't go into those offices.
Could we call Mr. Anderson back? He's probably the most appropriate professional to answer that question.
Right.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. So the grade finished floor of the garage building is 304.35. The bottom of curb outside is 303.79. So you have that 6 inch plus of height difference in the asphalt area of the parking lot from the floor of the garage. So it would have to, come up that 6 inches of flooding in the parking lot before it actually got to the office. So Mr. Chairman, you're correct. I testified at 6 inch curbs. That's what we are proposing. And so it would have to be at least that. So the dry wells would have to fill up and then fill up the parking lot 6 inches before it started having an opportunity to go into the office space that's in the existing garage.
And there's no open space under the, what we're just, for the purposes of this conversation, there's no open space under the garage floor at this point. Is that correct?
No, that is correct. No, No open space.
And those floors are level, or are they at an angle, or?
I haven't been inside. I'm assuming that they're level or they will be made somewhat level or to be reused. If they're like a 6-inch pitch on it because it's a garage, they'll probably be modifying that so it's an office space floor and would therefore be level.
So, Mr. Robertson, would there be reason to consider putting a sump pump or something like that into that area where water could be removed if in fact it exceeded the 6 inches and ran into those spaces?
I'm just trying to think of where a sump would go if that were the case. I mean, you put it by the plumbing, which Mr. Fleischer kind of pointed out. It's kind of in flux until we know where the tenants are or where those bathrooms really should go.
Mr. McCall,
Yes.
I don't think that there's there's no harm in putting a sump pump if they get tenants that looks they're going to need it. There might, but they don't have a layout. They don't know where it's going to be. I think nobody wants to have flooding in any of their office spaces. And if a sump pump is what it takes when the mechanical engineer does the design, I'm sure they will add it. There's no opposition to it.
Yeah, I just, note that, I mean, not only from a non-professional point of view and as far as climate change is concerned, the anticipation that storms are becoming more frequent and more challenging, but then also in terms of the state of New Jersey, as we're looking at the potential impacts of climate and water.
Yeah.
I just wonder if we shouldn't try to be ahead of the game, since we know, I mean, this is a classic example of a piece of property where there is a fairly significant slope. And while I know that the plan provides for an aggressive strategy in terms of removal of water, or nonetheless, the potential still remains for retention beyond that capacity. And so, how do we manage that situation should it occur? That really is the question that I'm raising.
Well, yeah, I understand. I mean, just to give you an idea, there is no evidence of flooding in the garages currently. And right now, the water is no curb there to protect it. So we are giving it, not only the drainage system as an addition, but we're also putting the curb and lowering the parking lot so that it has more difficult time getting there. It has to build up much more significantly. I don't think anybody can really plan for the probable maximum flood that we're going to get next time. But I think these are nice improvements that, exceed what's required by ordinance.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Mr. Simon, do you have any questions?
Just a comment about the elevations. There are a lot of windows, especially on the north elevation, and they're all different sizes. So I would like to see some more consistency between like the number of panes and the size of the windows that are used throughout the buildings, because it's a lot, and sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 6. So just kind of keep that in mind from the aesthetics. So that was just more a comment as opposed to a question.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Harris, do you have any questions?
I do, and forgive me if you've already gone through this, but can you just explain the reason for the connection from the garage to the residential building?
Sure. Early on, the applicant wanted to combine the office use. I think that was the kind of the first stab at it when we were taking a look at the zoning. And then it was determined that if we hadn't done that and they wanted to turn the garage into offices, it was going to require a change of use, and it could no longer be an accessory use, which is going to trigger another type of variance that we weren't interested in pursuing. So we decided to go with this. And at the time, the addition was larger, so it made sense to just connect it all on one. And now when it's skinnier, it looks like we're forcing the connection, but originally it made more sense. You know, it was a longer addition, so.
Understood. And then if you were to get rid of the addition, other than that terrace, how would it affect the rest of the residential building?
If we were to lose the connection, we would lose the terrace at 102. And I don't think there'd be any other impact, although I think we'd have to study the grading, because on the south side of the garages, the grade is just under the windowsills. So something is happening here too. So there might have to be a cutout and a retaining wall designed or something to connect the parking lot to this landscaped area if we were to go that way. We'd have to study that. But I don't think it would affect any other of the residential units.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Vieira, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I'm going to go back to Mr. Anderson, but let me do the one architectural question I have. I guess this plan, I believe, shows 5 rear windows in the garage. Is that correct? 4 existing and 1 new in the middle. Is that correct? No, good. No, I wanted the floor plan first.
Okay.
There's 6 shown there, but on here there are 5 shown.
So I think I may have misspoke, and there are 5 original, and the 6th is a new window that didn't get picked up in the floor plan.
Okay, unless I was totally not paying attention on Sunday, I think there are only 4 existing. The 2 towards the end, each of the ends of the building. I should have taken a picture while I was there, but okay.
You could.
So you're adding 1, if they're 4, they're 5, or you want to end up with 6.
Yes, if you go to the elevation, Janice, I do have a note calling for the 4th one is called as a new window, so I'm pretty sure that one is new. And I guess the question is the 3rd one. The 3rd one isn't shown in that plan view, so maybe that one's also new and we missed the note. But you're right. I think the client wanted this look in the elevation, so that's what we would.
I mean, this makes more sense to me, having them like this, because they're going to be relatively evenly spaced. But okay, okay. And I guess, Mr. Anderson, I want to go back to the elevations and the contours and the finished floor of the building and the top of the curb and the bottom of the curb, and and I'm struggling because your contours don't show in that rear parking area. And so what grade is that parking area where the handicap spaces and the spaces adjoining the municipal lot? What elevation is that?
So at the depressed curb where you go in for the ADA, for the access ramp, it's 303.85. At the end of it, it's 303.61. Okay, and then across the lot where that inlet is, where at the low point that I described before, is 303.3. So the reason you don't see contours in there is because it's all within the 1 foot. It's basically a very flat area. But there is there is a low point, and everything heads towards that low point. If you look over by the garages, what is the current garage is going to be converted. You have a bottom of curb at 303.79. And in the corner of the lots is 303.73. So that's the bottom of curb. And so you have pitch from all directions to that top of grate elevation. I have the top of curb shown because it's a B inlet, but it's a half a foot down. So it's 303.3 at that point. So you're 7/10 of a foot from, you know, in any, is the maximum in the direction, like from that inlet that we have in the driveway, it's just a little over 0.7 of a foot drop. So you have a steep pitch on the driveway, it comes down, it levels out. And that's why the ADA spaces are suitable there, because it's a very level parking area.
Okay, I want to go now. What elevation do your plans show the top of the curb?
Top of the curb, at the building, at the back of the building is 304.29 and 304.5 on the right side and 304.29 on the left side.
Okay, well, I'm trying to understand. You had indicated the curbs were 6 inches high, but you're only showing them as being
Well,
less
I
than.
show both elevations. So if you look at on the back of the building, right where the cursor is kind of at, you have top of curb 304.5 and bottom of curb 304. If you go to the center, that's where the depressed curb is. So that's where the curb is a flush curb for the access ramp. So you only have a bottom of curb elevation there at 303.85. If the 6-inch curb went through, it would be 6 inches higher than that. And where you do have the 6-inch curb on the left corner, you have a top of curb elevation of 304.29 and a bottom of curb of 303.79.
Right. Okay, so I'm just
Go ahead.
Okay, so where isn't, I think you just said there's one area where it's not the 6 inches. Is that just the handicapped access
Just the
area?
handicap ramp, where I have the spot elevation for the handicap ramp. Because it's a type 7 ramp where it goes in as a level area and then pitches up to the left and pitches up to the right.
So in terms of the flooding concern Mr. McCulloch was raising, you have, in terms of the garage, you have the 6 inches and then you have an additional little bit higher that the finished floor of the garage is.
It's basically a sidewalk that is it's about 6 foot wide and it's pitched at 2% or less. So it's a minor increment above the top of curb elevation, but it just, if a raindrop hits next to the doorway, it's going to run towards the top of curb. So it drains away from the building.
So the garage should be relatively safe barring a catastrophic storm. And
Yes,
then it's going to first flow into the municipal lot before it actually hits the building, because that'll be a lower point. And I'm not saying I think that's a good thing, rather than it flow there than into a building.
yes, I agree.
Mr. Harrison, I have one more question.
Okay.
Can we go to page 13 of the architect's presentation? Yeah. And let's sort of hone in on that little balcony here. The problem I had, which is why I spoke to the architect about it, is you have this double gable section. It's almost like a pavilion that's sticking out. And what people are not noticing is that little brick wall underneath that terrace is actually sticking out further forward than is the wall of that pavilion. So instead of the pavilion continuing and coming down, the pavilion is actually behind that little brick wall that's supporting the theoretical terrace and your connector. And you can see that in your plans. And that sort of significantly takes away from the notion of this double gable pavilion that at least at the top is quite symmetrical and ought to continue straight down into the ground. And because of this wall of the connector coming out, as opposed to being recessed, which would allow the line of the pavilion to run through, it really takes away from the from the way it works. I'd rather have the connection on the sidewalk even than over there, because that just sort of takes away totally from the notion of that double gable pavilion being essentially thrust out and going straight down to the ground and clearly standing forward of the other pieces. So that was the reason for my comment. Thank you.
Are there any members of the public who have questions for any of the witnesses who just testified? Janice, do we?
The only member we have is Miss Rombo. Miss Rombo, you don't have any questions? No.
Her question is, when will we be done and can we move on to her applications?
Right.
That's correct.
Okay, Ms. John Bass, did you have any further witnesses?
I do, but I think that, would it be possible to have a 5-minute break so I can consult with my client for a moment to see if we're proceeding or going to ask to carry this application?
Okay. Okay, we'll take a 5-minute break as well. And so where are we? We'll come back at 9:45.
Okay.
Thank you.
Janice, are we set to go?
We are set to go.
The TV rolling? Ms. John Basta, how do you want to proceed?
Yes, if we could, Mr. Chair, we'd like to ask to carry the application to the board's next meeting in order to provide an opportunity for us to explore Mr. Fleischer's concept of disconnecting the buildings.
And in your opinion, Mr. Sullivan's opinion, whether notice is required if you decide to do that?
Yeah, I think if they're going to revise the plan and they're going to disconnect the buildings, I think that because it's a use variance, I think it would be very wise and appropriate to renotice.
We agree, and we would renotice.
May I ask a question? Just to clarify. What constitutes a separation of two buildings? For example, if it was a covered walkway and the roofs were attached, is that still the same situation we have here today? That's the only question I'm asking. In other words, if it's not, is it a single building because it's enclosed, or it's a single building because it's attached?
I believe, Mr. Fleischer, that we made an amendment to the zoning ordinance over the last year that required a certain separation for it to be considered a separate building. I'd have to look through the code. I don't recall what was 6 inches or what the number was, but we did talk about that.
Well, I think it was in response to a matter that we reviewed, and I thought they fixed what we thought was an anomaly in the ordinance.
I think we tried to fix it. I don't know if it was, I think it was adopted because we proposed quite a few things that did not go through, but I think this was adopted, and I'll have to double check what the number is.
Because I think there are, I would just comment that there are options to do this physically attaching the buildings without necessarily connecting them the way they connect. That's why I asked the question. And
yeah, well, I think maybe the ordinance would have to be reviewed in that sense. I know in other municipalities, for example, there are ordinances that say in such a case, if there's less than a 10-foot separation, it's considered part of the principal building and that kind of thing. So, I think it's going to be ordinance sensitive, and they're going to have to look at that.
Yeah, okay. And I think that the safe course in terms of notice is to do notice
anyway.
And then no matter how we come out on it, you're covered.
Because I think there are some very good solutions to the issue that I've raised, at least.
And just so you don't go gratuitously changing things based on questions I asked, I am not going to require you to change the red cedars. I'm going to put a condition related to them. I'm not saying if you decide to change them, but I'm not going to do a condition requiring that. So if you want to keep them, don't be concerned that I'm going to blow them up.
Thank you.
Okay, so find it now. The application of 63 Park Street Montclair LLC for property at 63 Park Street is being continued until our October 20th meeting. There will be further notice provided to deal with the additional variance request. But if you're been otherwise silent but are interested in the application, we will hear the application again on October 20th, and we will try to have 7 eligible board members for you that evening.
And you'll consent to an extension of time for the board to act until that date?
We will. But Mr. Chair, if we can modify the carry to state that it's going to be carried without the need for further notice, provided we do not disconnect the buildings, because we're going to explore it. I'm not 100% sure it's going to be able to happen. And if it can't, then I would prefer not to renotice.
Okay, so if the applicant is keeping it as one principal building, there will be no further notice, and you will will have to be here on October 20th if you're interested in the application.
Thank you. And do we know if the October 20th meeting will be in person or virtual?
It's virtual.
Virtual? Okay. And those meetings instructions are on the township's website, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and your comments. We will see you October 20th. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, the next applicant. No. Okay, I printed the notice. And we had it, and we still have it. Next application is that of Rixson and Danielle Hacking for property at 18 Warfield Street. This is an application for a variance to construct an addition to the house. The property is in the R1 one-family residential zone. The property is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 2 and Block 707. A variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-45D to permit a rear yard setback of less than the required setback. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes, taxes paid are paid and the notice is in order.
Are the applicants present?
Ms. Rombaugh, I know you're here. Are the owners here? Courtney, you need to turn on your microphone. There you go.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, they are not present. I'm representing them.
Okay, well, you're not an attorney, correct?
No, I'm an architect.
Okay, ordinarily, because you're not an attorney, the owner applicant has to be present. Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you want to move past that based upon the nature and scope of this type of an application, but that's the general rule.
I could have him call in. He's at a Dave Matthews concert, but he said he would call in if we need him to.
That might be interesting.
Well, I can you see, and if we can, I mean, Mr. Sullivan, I assume if he gives an appearance and that will be sufficient?
Yes.
Can you see if you can reach him, and
even if you can just conference him in on your phone somehow, if that would work also.
Oh, like FaceTime him and then.
Yeah, I think otherwise I think it's going to be a technological nightmare.
Yeah.
In the break, we've now moved 3 applications to that October meeting. And my question is, did we have so few applications that we can now still eliminate the special meeting?
Joe, I'm actually going to be out of state. I'm going to be on vacation that day.
Okay.
We don't have anybody because we haven't filled Graham's position. I have nobody to run the meeting.
That's fine. I just, then we get back up, and I'm just trying to figure out if that's a problem. That's all.
Yeah, if I had planned this vacation at the beginning of the year, not anticipating that I'd have to, fill in for Graham.
No problem. Thank you.
Hi, we're not done yet, but you have to make an appearance, so I'm just going to show your face to the screen.
No, not right now.
No, it's okay. It's okay. All right, there he is. Is that enough?
Would you just identify yourself for the record, please?
Okay, can you state your name for the record?
Yes, I can. My name is Rixson Hacking. Live at 18 Warfield Street.
Okay, you're not planning on being present at this, but you're consenting to Ms. Rombaugh to proceed on your behalf?
Yes, please.
Okay, have fun.
We couldn't be in a prior engagement we could not get out of.
Okay.
I apologize.
Have fun.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Bye. That was fun. All right. Do you want me to raise my hand and say my name?
Yeah, if you could. I'm just Still getting over that. Okay, yes. Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes, I do.
State your name and address, please.
Courtney Rombo, 141 Central Ave, Montclair.
Okay, and you're a registered architect in the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
That's correct.
And your license is in good standing?
That's correct.
Okay, unless there's any other questions, I think you can proceed with your testimony.
She can proceed.
Okay. Let's start with the site plan in the top right corner, please, Janice.
Okay. There you go.
This site is very unusual. Apparently, there's nothing else like this in Montclair. It's an L-shaped property. The address is on the Warfield side, and the house is sideways on the site. The clients would like to put a kitchen, renovate their kitchen, and add another bedroom because their families, they've got 3 kids and they don't have enough bedrooms now. We were going to do it on the side on Warfield Street and take down the garage and build a new addition, but it seemed intrusive on the street, even though we didn't have to get a variance. So we decided to tuck it into the corner of the property so they could have access to their tranquil core of their yard on the long side. And this would require variance because we're encroaching on the rear setback, which is that green part on my site plan, which would be 1/4 of the length of the property. So if you go to view 1 at the top of the middle of the page, please. Doesn't look like it's showing up on this.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah. So that view 1 is the view from Warfield Street. And you'll see on all the views, it's pretty hard to even see where this addition is from the street. But on the left is what is currently there, which is a sunroom with a swooping roof. And on the right is the addition, which it pretty much will look the same from this view. On view number 2, this is when I'm standing up the street towards Highland a little bit. You'll see on the existing, it's a 1-story addition that swoops up to like a 1/2 story. So you don't see anything on the existing, and you do see a little bit of a addition on from that view. And then view number 3 is when you're standing up on Highland Ave. It's over 100 feet away, but if you do walk up to the fence, you'll be able to see the difference. This addition doesn't go, it does go outside the footprint, but it doesn't go further than the existing footprint on either side. We go back to the site plan for a moment. In the top right corner, I marked 2 different options for locations of condenser units. And I believe I saw in a report that someone on the board prefers them to be on the rear yard setback opposed to on the side yard setback. So in the green opposed to the yellow, which we're fine with. We're fine with whichever you guys prefer. Okay, let's zoom out for a moment, please.
See, what did you want?
Zoom out, please.
Oh.
Let's see if there's anything else on the, okay. At the bottom, you can see a view of the existing house from standing up in the yard towards Highland. So you'll see the part that is going to get demolished. Oops. The part in that square right there. And on the left is a black and white rendering of the new addition, 2-story addition. It's a kitchen on the first floor and a primary suite up above. And we did go through the historical board. They gave us some feedback and we made adjustments based on their feedback. We had a much bigger gable that was a different slope, and they asked us to make it a smaller gable with the same slope as the other dormer. So we did that, and I also pushed it back so it's in a different plane. So now the main house is ahead of the second floor of the addition. And the roof of the addition is the same slope as the existing house. Janice, would you mind pulling up the Exhibit A, the rendering?
Okay.
That's beautiful.
Addition?
No, the beautiful mountains.
Oh, okay. I was like, wow, great review already. All right, here's a color rendering of the new addition.
There you go.
Do you guys want me to go through the plans, or is this enough for you to start asking me questions?
That's up to you.
It's up to you. I mean, if you're comfortable with where you are, and let us ask questions, and then when we're done, I'll give you a chance if you want to add anything at that point that we didn't cover that you think we should know about.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, Mr. Fleischer, do you have any questions?
I actually don't. I think this is a very nice solution, and it's well situated, and I like the changes that were made at the request of the Historic Commission. So I think it's very well done. I'm happy with what I'm seeing.
Hey, Mr. Church, do you have any questions?
I have no questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Simon, do you have any questions?
So you agreed to move the condensers to the rear yard?
We will agree to that, yes.
So that eliminates one of the variances, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Harris, do you have any questions?
Can you talk about the alterations you're making to the garage?
We're making no alterations to the garage.
Okay.
I guess in plan, yeah, there is some inside. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure.
Nothing you can see from the outside.
Yeah, can we talk about what you're doing on the interior to of the garage?
Sure. On the top is the existing plan. This is the second floor, actually. Would you mind going one back? On the top right is the existing plan, and the middle right is the proposed plan. During a remodel, I think it was in the 1980s, they did a remodel where they renovated the kitchen and took part of the existing garage. We're just giving it back to the house. So you can see where, yeah, you can see where they took some of the garage for the kitchen, but now we don't need that anymore.
And then the gable that you're adding, is that just decorative?
That's on the second floor. Mind going one page forward. And please zoom in on the bottom plan on the left side. You see where the king size bed is in that primary suite? The gable is just above that.
I'm sorry, I meant the dormer on the garage.
Oh, that's existing.
That's existing, okay.
We're just responding to the slope of that existing dormer for the new
What
dormer.
do you mean you're responding?
We're taking the slope that is on that existing dormer and using the same slope over on the new dormer.
Not on the garage, but on the addition.
Right. Nothing on the garage is changing on the exterior.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
See there.
Okay, Mr. Caulfield, do you have any questions?
There's no basement under the new addition, is that correct? Or
They
Or is it gonna be-
Probably will do a full base. They're trying to decide if they're going to do a crawl space or a full basement, and it's going to depend on the cost of the project.
Okay, and there's a basement in the regular house, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Vieira, do you have any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Janice, I'm confused on the side yard versus the rear yard, and obviously not confused as to side yard number one, but you know, the ordinance was amended. I mean, I don't know how to view this other than to apply a corner lot logic to it. And the ordinance was amended so the rear yard is the one opposite with a street frontage with the least dimension, which is the frontage on. This is not affecting how I'm going to vote on this. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm voting on, what I'm getting a variance for. And the frontage on Highland is shorter than the frontage on Warfield. So I'm not sure why what's labeled as the Warfield side yard number 2 isn't the rear yard.
Because when we scratched our heads trying to figure out how to apply the setbacks to this, and the decision in the office was that it's not a corner lot, but a through lot. So you don't apply the corner lot logic, it's a through lot with 2 front yards. That was the approach that we took.
Well, I certainly agree they're 2 front yards, but a normal through lot doesn't have a rear yard.
Courtney, I know you worked with Richard on how to apply. This was prior to my.
Yeah. So originally, Graham told us we didn't need a variance because it was complicated then too. But basically, what the rear yard was, he was calling it a side yard. And then Janice and Richard re-looked at it and decided this was how it should be. And the reason I added the colors was because it was so confusing. So I wanted to make it clear with everybody so we were on the same page. But there's no other site like this apparently in Montclair, and there never has been. So there's no precedents to look at. So this is just what they decided, and we're going with it.
So yeah, so I went with Richard's interpretation of how to address this, and that, which again was prior to my involvement in this. So
But we seem to be creating a weird little hybrid, because if it was a true through lot, there would be no rear yard, period.
right.
And so, you know, while a chunk was cut out of it, it functions much more like a corner lot, as frontage on 2 perpendicular streets, which is a typical corner lot situation. Which would switch the rear yard for the side yard too, doesn't change how I view this. I think the condensers belong in the shaded green area to not label it. I think that is
In that case, this would be the rear yard here. And you need the variance for this part of the addition, and this would be the side yard.
In which case, the whole house would be in the rear yard.
Yes, yes.
Well, I mean, we with corner lots, we frequently end up with, I mean, it depends upon which yard based on where the house is situated, but they're almost always a problem because of the 2, in this case, extremely large front yard, but leaving, very little yards. But as I said, starting this, I mean, I don't have a problem granting the variances. They're following the line of the existing house in that yard. And other than, I think the condensers are better located opposite, well, Warfield Street, you know, and going to the back of the lots on Mountain Terrace. You know, okay. Any other questions from members of the board? I'm going to do this just for the sake of doing it. Are there any members of the public who have questions, testimony, statements, comments, anything at all they want to say about the application? I assume, Janice, based on what I'm seeing, that our attendants are the TV station, Ms. Rombo and the board, and you and Michael.
Yeah, there's no attendees.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Rombo, do you have anything further you wish to add before we discuss and vote on the application?
I don't think it matters, but there is a document with some letters from 2 of their neighbors supporting this renovation, this addition.
Yeah, unfortunately, we really can't accept those letters. If they were present and they wanted to express their position, that would be one thing, but the board can't accept letters.
Okay, good to know.
Okay, well, I don't know how best to, we'll start discussion with Mr. Fleischer.
I think this is a very nice solution. I have no problems with this. I'm in favor of this application. And I don't have any problems with the variances that are required as they've been defined.
Okay, Mr. Church.
I would concur with Mr. Fleischer. I'm in favor of this application also.
Mr. McCulloch.
I'm also in favor.
Mr. Simon.
I'm in favor.
Ms. Harris.
I'm in favor.
Mr. Caulfield.
Same here. In favor.
Mr. Vieira.
I'm also in favor of the application.
Okay. I'm also in favor of the application, given the very unique configuration of the lot and the location of the house on it. I think, you know, it clearly justifies the granting of a yard variance, and you know, I think that the addition is close to invisible from Warfield Street, and from Highland Avenue, you have to walk up to the fence in order to really be able to see where the addition will be. So I think we should condition it that the condenser units be located in the area that's shaded in green on the plan, so we're not calling it by a yard name. Does someone want to make a motion?
Move approval of the application with the condition as stated by the chair.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, go call them and tell them to enjoy the concert even more.
Thank you all. I appreciate it.
And we clearly are going to have a very busy October agenda, so enjoy your relatively early night off, and we'll see you mid-October on October 20th. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Have a good evening.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Holiday, Janice.
Good night.
Night.